When I first met our Morning Mon, his actual name is Ricky. And so I was going through before I started recording. It's okay. How do you pronounce your name? How do you pronounce your name? And I got to him. I was like, is it Ricky? Because it's Rikai. I went, okay. And his buddies just started busting out laughing because it was. I was like, all right, it's going to be one of those interviews. All right. Put a marker in. And I'm going to make sure it's not too loud. Whoop, that is a little too loud. All right, that's better. Okay, you ready, Joe?
Yeah.
All right.
Get ready to laugh out loud with Wise and Nerdy, the show hosted by two hilarious dads who bring their unique blend of wit, wisdom, and nerdiness to the airwaves. From sharing hilarious anecdotes about their own experiences to giving advice on navigating the ups and downs of life, these two dads have got you covered. But that's not all. They're also obsessed with all things nerdy, from comic books and sci-fi movies to video and board games. So whether you're a fellow dad, a pop culture fanatic, or just in need of a good laugh, this is Wise and Nerdy. And now let's have some fun.
And fun shall be had tonight. I am Charles McFarland, Rock God of Podcasting, here with the ever so Mormon, embrace _ Joseph Hard. And,
I mean, it's what I am, but it's not necessarily a core aspect of my personality.
Look, don't ruin the good intro, man. I just break it up every week to try to do something fun. And the man who's going to teach us how to be better dads is Thomas Pfanner of the Leadership Dad. How you doing, Thomas?
Thank you. I appreciate y'all having me here.
Yeah, we are excited to have you. We've been working through a guest site, trying to meet different people. And as I said in the pre-show, you're the first successful match we have made. And we're very excited to have you on.
We've been added to other people's mailing lists, even though they didn't end up joining us on the show. But yeah.
This is true.
It's the question of the week.
Poor Kurt. He's off suffering, and I think he's in Montreal tonight doing a quartet concert. Is that?
I think so. Yeah, barbershop.
Yeah, I think it's where
barbershop
quartet. Yeah. So Kurt is normally on here, and he is a professional barbershop quartet singer, and the holidays is his busiest time. So that kind of brings us to the question that we announced a couple weeks ago. What is your favorite holiday? Joe, what is yours?
My birthday, of course.
We're really on the holiday term. Okay. Not your kids' birthdays, not your wife's birthday.
And it's actually one of my kids' birthdays today. Probably Christmas, to be honest. We've got a lot of traditions in our family centered around Christmas, and we try not to get completely wrapped up in the commercialism of it, but we try to spend extra time with family and try to be nicer to each other. Doesn't always work, but we try.
What about you, Thomas? Do you have a favorite holiday?
I'm just gonna shoot straight with Thanksgiving, and it's a few reasons. One, typically I like to get a really good workout in on Thanksgiving. There's not a lot of expectations for the day. I remember when I was a kid, I played a lot of video games, and you know, you get the day off school. It's just, especially I was a teacher for a while, there's always a lot of celebration over. I almost feel it was like more of a celebration for those 4 days off than even the 2 weeks off at winter break, because it was just such a time of there's not a lot going on. It can slow down, and the gifts at Christmas are great, but like really just the time with my family, I remember that more.
So a random kid in the chat says, work out on Thanksgiving. I work out my belly. Okay. As the holidays as a whole, I don't have a favorite one. I've been a paramedic for almost as long as I can remember. So you just work, you do what it is. It is what it is. I guess, though, if I really think about if a holiday is a special time that we do something different, it'd probably be around, we call it the holidays, right? Thanksgiving to Christmas, because this is the time of year where the world changes and they do Christmassy cool things, right? And so for me and my family, we get to go to Stone Mountain in Atlanta, and they do Christmas Town. I think it's called Stone Mountain Christmas officially. We've always called it Christmas Town. Of course, you can only get it this time of year, and it's beautiful. It's like 3 million lights, and the weather's just cold enough. And we take the train ride, and it's. I would do it in the summer. Well, okay, it might be too hot in the summertime, but I'd do it any other time. But the only time I can do it is around the holidays. So I'd have to say the Thanksgiving Christmas era, if it were around there. And Randuck is not wrong. Charles's favorite is the day after sales. That's 100%. So none of us said Valentine's Day. So I wonder what that says about.
Meh.
You said meh. Joe, I believe.
We've got one from. Oh yeah, so we've got that, but we also have a speak pipe about the question of the week as well from DevoSite.
When my wife met me, I lived in a house way in the country,
Unheard of.
like a 45-minute drive to the nearest town. And I was always planting trees, fruit trees. I had this grandiose idea of an orchard. And the deer were constantly destroying all the trees, rubbing them, the bucks. So I always told her Arbor Day. And that's always been my answer. Arbor Day is my favorite holiday. Kind of being cheeky, but it fit the narrative at the time, and she didn't know what quite to make of that, being such a young relationship. But to this day, if you ask her what my favorite holiday is, she'll tell you Arbor Day. Officially, I mean, that's kind of a goofy answer, but realistically, I kind of like Thanksgiving is probably my favorite. Friends getting together. I usually cook. I enjoy cooking. I don't get to cook all the time. Being in the tech industry, working long hours, it doesn't happen very much. So, Arbor Day, Thanksgiving, different reasons. Go plant a tree.
Go plant a tree.
Go plant a tree.
Okay, Joe, I really thought he was setting up a bad joke.
I thought he was too, to be honest.
Our fans, Thomas, will go to great lengths to make me think it's a story and it's a bad dad joke. But that's
amazing.
I like it. He was planting trees for a living when he met his wife, so he says Arbor Day. Why not? All right, Joe, let's roll that dice.
Roll that dice.
And while he's doing that, I want to address a comment on our YouTube channel. Greg's Playlist responded back to one of our previous episodes where I said, I don't know why Excel doesn't have spell check. It should have spell check. He goes, it's had spell check for like ever. I went, oh, my bad. So yeah, stand corrected. What'd you roll, Joe?
All right.
What are you nerding about?
All right, Jebediah tried to say, what are you nerding out about? And I'll go first. A regular on this show is AMC Screen Unseen. If you're unfamiliar for what Screen Unseen is, it is basically a sneak preview of a movie 1 to 2 weeks ahead of time that you just don't know what it is. All you know is the rating of the movie and the average runtime. So they've gotten really smart about that because people start figuring out, oh, that runtime matches this movie. So they make it within a range for the runtime. And sometimes you get okay movies. Sometimes you get fantastic movies.
And
Joe,
a lot of them end up being from film festivals. So
true, a lot of it is Sundance Film Festival. I've seen a lot of interesting indie films I probably wouldn't have seen otherwise, and I really loved them. But Joe, I'll go ahead and give you a hint. It's not a film festival movie. Take a guess at what this Monday's Screen Unseen was.
Friday the 13th.
All right, moving on. So we're watching the previews, and I think they're interesting, like fun, but I can tell you they're not good. There's like a preview for a movie called Werewolf, and it's cheesy as it sounds. Y2K, which is a comedy horror take on Y2K. If the machines actually came alive and started killing people. These are bad previews. So my wife was getting very wary about what film are we going to be watching with all these bad previews.
Well, because a lot of times they try to have them to be tonally similar. Yeah. Well, it's similar in the violence and the blood because we got to see Gladiator II Oh,
on
okay.
Monday night, and it's fantastic. If you liked Gladiator 1, I think you'll love Gladiator 2. So it was that's where I'm gonna leave it. It was just fantastic. Ridley Scott knows how to shoot a movie, so it's brilliantly framed and it's beautiful. I thought the acting was great. I really enjoyed Gladiator. So this
How
one,
was the storyline? Was it okay?
yeah, it fit the vibe of the first one. It's 16 years later, which I didn't check to see when Gladiator was released, so it's perhaps actually 16 in the movie. It's 16 years later, so I'm not sure if it's real time.
Got it.
Then the other thing I did is I trolled two friends of mine this week, Joe.
Okay.
I went and re-downloaded Pokemon Go podcast, not podcast, that's us. Pokemon Go, signed in, opened and sent a gift to Phil and to John, and then immediately deleted the app just to mess with it. Because Thomas, sorry, I got really bad about returning gifts when we did the show. We quit the show well over a year ago, and we still get grief from some of the fans like, he still hadn't opened my gift. So now, John and Phil, that clock resets, and I hope it drives you crazy. You're welcome. Now, one of the things that Thomas was telling us he got into, which I've always been interested in, I actually had the book, The Art of Peace, which to my understanding was written by the founder of Jiu-Jitsu. You're really nerding out about Jiu-Jitsu right now.
Yeah, so I've been training for off and on since I was about 17, and there's so many details, and every time I feel like I got into another level, there's always somebody that beats me. There's always somebody better. It's the never ending journey, and so it's a sport that challenges me mentally, physically, spiritually, and it takes a lot of, like, if I don't have that spirit of nerding out and enjoying it, and I just take it too seriously, it doesn't make it fun. So when I'm in that space of looking at the details and nerding out, like, okay, I could pull the lapel here and wrap it over his shoulder and then grab this, that would be a fun position. That's when it's a lot of fun. And so, and I've been in that space where I just pushing and grinding and I'm not being playful. And so that's why I really appreciate you guys' energy tonight, because it kind of it's bringing me back to a little bit more of a space of being a kid.
You know what? That is a little behind baseball. One of the things that podcasters or creators tend to talk about behind the scenes, like, what's your demographic? What's your audience look like? And it's hard to explain. So I always tell why we got into this show, because we can appeal to young people, but we're really doing it for Joe and myself, because we are grown kids, and not in that negative way that the world tries to say, is like, oh, you never grow. It's like, you shouldn't get rid of your fun. Have fun. Yeah. And I love to hear that jiu-jitsu is not just a workout for you. It's not just a martial art. It is your fun.
Yeah. I tell my son, he's like, when I step down onto the mat, or I have a rule, one of my values, like, some people have value of like integrity or honor. Like, one of my values is 17. Every day I want to do something that makes me feel like I'm 17 years old.
Oh, wow. All right.
Yeah. So jiu-jitsu is one of those things. It could be playing a video game, like, I don't do that very often. But like lately, it's starting to get dark. Like, we love to be real active as a family, like go and explore things. But now here, it's dark now at 5:00. Yes, we can still go to the park, but the amount of time we're there is not as much. So, it's like, if there's a time of year that I pull out the old PlayStation 2, it's this time of year, like between now and Christmas, to just have a few fun rounds of Mortal Kombat or, Madden or whatever it might be.
Okay.
Yeah, man.
Now we've got a comment here from Random Kid. He wants to know if you do competitive or casual jiu-jitsu. Or
I
both.
would consider I consider myself competitive. I compete about 3 times a year. In 2023, I competed 4 times, and this year I competed twice. Right. I did last year compete in the world championships for Nogi, and I lost in the first round, but it was still same thing, like fun experience as a kid. Like, I get to compete in the world championships. Like, Like, I've got to be able to go there if I'm going to have a chance to win a world championship. So why not have, just writing a fun story. And that's what it's about for me, is just keeping it fun. So, but that said, I think that to be a strong player in jiu-jitsu, you've got to compete a few times a year because it forces you to tighten up your game. If you have some wins, you understand what is working. You have some losses, it's really clear what you need to change and adjust. And if it's just casual, like, yes, you'll get better. I just think it's so much faster if you're willing to step into the discomfort of competing in front of people.
So
I have
a quick. Go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say, I have a friend who is a former UFC fighter, and I could be misremembering, but I'm pretty sure he said that jiu-jitsu was one of the best foundations for an MMA fighter. And so that's just random comment, but man, you're talking about that made me think of that. So
absolutely. Yeah. I don't do any more full contact. I did when I was younger. When I was in college, I did a few fights. But it's definitely helpful because I wrestled a few years, but like having that edge on the ground where okay, if we get close together and we end up on the ground, if you have the edge in jiu-jitsu, that's where you want to have the fight. So it's definitely an advantage.
There you go.
You use it for fun now. Is that what made you choose jiu-jitsu over all the other martial arts or other things you can do?
I do like striking. It's just like I started to get headaches a lot. And so I was like, okay, I could continue this. And I went to school to be a teacher and exercise science background. And then like I did all this work to develop my brain. It doesn't make sense to continue to get punched in the face. So what I love about jiu-jitsu is we could play really hard and compete. And if you do it correctly, you're not going to take damage. Like there's still injuries that happen, but like if you're boxing the way that you're supposed to box, you're going to take damage. Like even if you have headgear and all that, right? But if you're doing jiu-jitsu well, there's going to be very little damage that you're going to take, and you could still go hard. So that's something I really appreciate it. The other thing is that there are the competitions around the area, and the complexity of it. There's always another level.
That's amazing.
There's so many ways to win, right? In wrestling, you put somebody on the back. That's the one way you can win. In jiu-jitsu, you can attack their neck, their arm, their wrist, their knee, their ankle, their back, their calf, whatever. Like you just need to create a dangerous situation for them, and you've taken care of business.
What is the win scenario in jiu-jitsu? I don't actually know.
So there are two primary philosophies in jiu-jitsu competition. One is called a submission-only tournament. And those you have to submit your opponent or it's a tie. So it's a lot like soccer, where if you get a draw, you get 1 point. If you get a win, you get 3 points in the tournament. And those are fun because they're typically round robin, and you get a few more matches when you do the sub-onlys. And I also think it's a different style of jiu-jitsu because the points don't matter. So if you get to a good, like this last tournament that I did in October, I got to a position where I scored a takedown. I took the guy down, and I was able to hold him there on his back for the rest of the match. And so I could take a risk and go for a submission, but he could also get out and get on top and end up getting ahead of me on points. So I made the decision to just stay there and not take as big a risk and take the win. But in a sub-only tournament, I would have had to continue to work to get the submission. Sub-only, you gotta tap them out, whether that's a choke, armbar, straight ankle lock, depending on the level. So I'm purple belt. As you move up, you get more options for submissions because they get, especially with the knee, they get more dangerous. They want to make sure people know when to tap and the dangers and risks involved. If somebody's going to putting on those submissions in a tournament, the points is different. So points, you get 2 points for a takedown, 3 points for passing guard, which probably doesn't mean much to you all. And then there are different positions that are identified as advantageous. So you get anywhere from 2 to 4 points for those if you establish those positions that are advantageous to you throughout the match. And so sometimes people score like 20, 30 points in a match if they just flow from one position to the next.
Okay. So not too far removed from Greco-Roman wrestling, where you can either win by pin or by points, depending on the format, obviously, like you said. Okay.
Yes.
I've always been interested in it. I've never researched it. And I just love it. It sounds as much as an art form as it is a fighting style.
Yes.
Just
Yes. Because even within it, there are so many different niches that you could be a footlock specialist. You could be somebody that's really good at taking the back. You could like the bent arm locks. Like you can take the match where you want to take it. So it's very much like, if I'm being honest, like wrestling compared to jiu-jitsu is like checkers and chess, because there's just so many different places that you can be good, and you could also be in danger with your opponent, because you could get any part of your body could get exposed, and that could end the match.
I could go on all night about that. So we have some time. So, Joe, what are you nerding out about?
Yeah, so this past weekend, Charles and I were at CONjuration. You know, anyone who's been listening to the podcast may have heard us mention that a time or two in the last several episodes. But it was a blast. Much smaller than Dragon Con, but we were expecting that going in. But what's nice about smaller format cons is you get to see people a bunch of times throughout the weekend and kind of get a feel for who they are, even if they don't talk to us, like that woman that was dressed up like the Purple Devil. But I intentionally signed up for a bunch of panels this go around. I got onto 6 panels, which isn't a ton, but it's a lot. It's the most I've ever done at a con.
It was good, man.
And it was a ton of fun. Even some of the panels where we had our last panel, for instance, we had one person in the audience, but it was a great conversation.
Yeah.
And you know, between the panelists and the woman in the audience also was getting in on it, and it was amazing. And yeah, our show went great. We saw people from our show throughout the weekend, and they told us how much they appreciated it. And yeah, it was a ton of fun. And that weekend also, Charles helped alleviate some of my battery issues with my cell phone. So my cell phone, it if it's not plugged in, it's dying. My cell phone. So Charles was like, "Hey, I've got this cell phone that's just been sitting in a drawer for the last year and a half. Do you want it?" And I'm like, "Yes, please." And so it's been great having that cell phone. Thank you, Charles, again.
And if anybody picked this up after CONjuration, thank you. We welcome you into the famdom, and we'd love to hear from you. And the young lady who was the Purple Devil Demon cosplay, quiet, but loved the energy, loved the cosplay. And my headcanon was, while she didn't really engage with the show, she's going to become our #1 fan and just show up to everything we ever do in that cosplay. And it's going to be amazing. So it was a blast. So cool, man. Did you buy anything?
I bought a few things. I bought one of Bob Magoo's books, which he's been on the show a couple of times. I bought one of the books from Ben Meeks, which
that's right, yeah.
He's obviously another author since I bought one of his books, but we're talking to him about coming on as a guest as well. And then I bought 4 pins. And the pins were custom art of ghosts dressed up as Marvel characters. And so I bought those 4 pins, and I gave one to each of my kids as well as one to my wife. And speaking of my wife, she pops in. The kids love the pins. Yeah, so they've put the pins on backpacks and laptop bags and things like that. And so they're loving that. So yeah, that's what you bought a few things as well while you were there, right?
Yeah, I bought a Christmas present for my executive administrator, and then I bought one of Bob's books for myself. So yeah, that was really about it. I did bid to win some other Harry Potter stuff for some other friends of mine, but I didn't make it. But all the donations that were bid went to the hurricane relief. So
Amazing.
really cool. So yeah, I mean, I usually don't get in on those things, but like, yeah, if it goes to relief and maybe I win, maybe I don't, to help somebody out. So that was cool. But speaking of Bob,
Roll that dice.
All right, we're just gonna go right down the list.
Daddy, tell me a story.
all right, Thomas, you're on the spot.
Yes.
How did you get started down the path to becoming the leadership dad?
Oh, great question. It was not a path that I saw coming. I was living in Eugene, Oregon with my wife and my son, Charles, and then my 2-year-old daughter. And Charles was born actually when I was 18. So my wife plays stepmom, and Charles had been living with us for full time for about 9 months. And prior to that, it was 50-50. But at the start of that 9 months, his mom moved away, like 2.5 hours away. And he's in the middle of his 8th grade year. I had coached his football team. I had been involved with his school. And I remember it was a night in January. And I know some people are really good about dates. I don't remember the exact date, but I know it was like mid-January. And I get a call from Charles after not being able to get a hold of him. And he said, "Dad, I'm tired of being controlled. I'm done with you. I'm moving in with mom. Peace out."
Man,
And that was basically it. Yeah. So I'm left there. My son's just walked out of my life. And it feels like all this work that I put in, over the past 14 years is just washing away. He's just about to start high school. And there's no one else to change, no one else to turn to but me. Charles, I was not going to have a conversation with him that was going to change his mind. I was not going to have a conversation with one of his counselors or teachers at school that was going to change Charles. The only person to change was me. And that was a big hit to my ego, because I was a middle school PE teacher. I had done a lot to, I'd read the Jocko Willink books and thought I was doing a lot of things great as a leader. And it wasn't that I wasn't doing great things. It's just that I wasn't where I needed to be yet. And so I had to make the decision of either staying put and just accepting this or making a change. And that's where I started to go down the path of what does it look like to rewrite my leadership as a dad so that I can connect with my teenage son in a way that he's going to lean into as opposed to be repelled from and pull away. And so that was the winter of 2022. And that's when this whole journey got started.
I gotcha. Random Kid said that would definitely be a huge wake-up call for me. Yeah, I mean, I'd hope no father wants to hear that, and I hope all of us would take that as a wake-up call. Yeah, what were you doing that your son perceived that you were controlling him?
Great question. Yeah, I wasn't a strong enough listener. As a dad, and as a man, I'd done a lot of things that the world respected and my peers respected, and I knew what worked. Like we all as dads, we've been through life and we're excited and we know what works. And so we see our kids struggle. We're like, dang it, like do this and it will solve your problem. You're in this problem. I know the path. This is the route out of the maze. They don't want to hear that. They want to go and run into the end of the maze and get crushed and get destroyed in their heart and figure it out on their own. And that's can be really hard for us as dads because how far do we let our kids fall before we say, no, like you need to go this way. And so for Charles, he likes to fall a long way. before he gets any correction. And so I was not, if I was to coach me back then, the number one thing that I would work on was listening skills and really understanding, not pushing Charles, not pressuring Charles, but like where, and I'm saying Charles, my son's Charles. I know we have Charles on the show.
I understand.
Too. Yeah. Where are you at? What is it that you're what? Okay. You know, you don't want to do this assignment. Tell me more about that. Why don't you like the class? Oh, okay. It's whatever it is. Hearing more was one of the first things that I needed to do to connect with him.
I was trying to look at the podcast so I could subscribe because I think you've got a lot of things to say. Joe, it sounded like you had a thought there.
Well, since you mentioned his podcast, I believe it's called Dads Who Lead podcast, correct?
Yes, the Dads Who Lead podcast.
So, but yeah, no, I was really liking what Random Kid had put here about kids lack the wisdom to recognize the wisdom in others. And that's definitely something that you develop as you age. Well, hopefully develop as you age, being able to recognize when others have experienced things that you have not, and being able to lean on their advice. But yeah, kids just want to find their own path.
I just subscribed to it. I made so many mistakes in my life, and you talk about that falling and learning the hard way. I think the phrase used was get his heart broken or hit hard. And
yeah,
man, I want to avoid that with my kids. And sometimes I think I haven't been hard enough on them because I tried different tactics than my parents tried. I tried to explain to them wisdom and insight and giving them choices and trying to give them some agency over their life. And I think to a degree, it has definitely worked out. I've got 2 boys, 2 girls. 2 are 19 and 18. The other 2 are 11 and 13 now. And like the 13-year-old got in trouble tonight at his wrestling match. And it's like, how do you become that better listener, Thomas? Because it's like, I'm trying to walk that line of, why did you do this? And you could actually be facing some charges. And I've done a lot in my life, so I'm not raging and freaking out. But at the same time, I mean, just to clarify, it was after a wrestling match. Some kid was giving him crap. He grabbed the kid's shirt. Mom got upset. It could be nothing, but it could be something. But I've told all my kids, if you get punched in the face, I'll get you back going. And did you beat the crap out of them? You know, but if they're just running their mouth, dude, that's the world we live in. How do you become that listener and not just want to go, oh my God, sit down for an hour and let me yell at you?
So how old is your son?
13.
He's 13. Okay. So kid's talking smack at you. He grabbed his shirt.
Apparently. Yeah. I wasn't there, but that's what his mom says is what he says. Yeah.
Well, given this exact circumstance, typically, like if I was coaching you, I'd ask you more questions, but I would say this to kind of shortcut it. If it was me, I would ask, what's your son's name?
Ryland.
I say, what motivated you to grab his shirt? And then he'd go into the story like, oh, this. And then eventually get back to, okay, so this was the action you took. This is how you felt. Identify, okay, what were the emotions that caused that feeling? Okay, so this made you mad. Does it still make it right for you to grab the kid and shove him to the ground, or grab his shirt, whatever what the action was? And then he can kind of like, okay, yeah, like it's okay to have an emotion. And I think that's something that we're taught a lot as men, that we shouldn't have emotion, or we shouldn't. These are things that should just be suppressed. You shouldn't feel angry. You shouldn't feel horny. You shouldn't feel aggressive. You shouldn't feel mad. You shouldn't feel happy. Like what are we supposed to?
Right.
How are we supposed to live life that way?
Yeah.
So identifying that emotion is fine. It's fine to be afraid. What's not fine is to be afraid and stop playing. So I would direct it as, number one, what motivated you to take the action? what was the emotion that you felt that caused you that? How would you do something different if you were in that situation again? So all question based. So now he's thinking about himself as the main character, as opposed to a role character that's, here's dad just telling me what I should have done differently. He wasn't even there.
Yeah. Move over, Joe. We got a counseling session. All right, Thomas. So no, that's brilliant. And Joe's just man. And I know we can't turn this into that whole session, but it just happened tonight.
But we can. Instead of rolling the dice, let's go on and lead into the how do I segment. Because this is a great transition.
So you mentioned the phrase you just said, be the main character in your story. And you said that's really what you focus on, teaching. Well, I presume, it can apply to anybody, but your focus is fathers and sons, which that's why we call this where fatherhood meets fandom. It's not just for dads, but we're dads. We're going to speak from our perspective and what we're dealing with. And just that phrase, be the main character in my own story. I mean, I realized I've never felt like I was growing up. And that was my rebellion. That's where I exploded out of it. That's where I did a lot of bad things to a lot of people. So without all my long-windedness, what does it mean to be the main character? I guess the segment, let me official. How do I be the main character in my own story?
Yes. Great question. And a lot of dads see it like, oh, I want my kid to be the main character in their story, and it starts with us as dads being able to model that. The difference between, let me ask, I'm going to put it back on you guys. Main characters in let's use Star Wars, the original trilogy. Who would you say, if there are 2 to 3 main characters, how would you describe, who would you describe as the main characters in the movie?
Definitely Luke and Leia would be the top 2, and probably Han would be number 3.
I would go
Vader,
Luke and Vader, and for me, I mean, that's what resonates is the father son there, and then the Yoda, the one that was for me, he was just trying to get Luke through his anger. So that's how I describe it, is the 3 main characters were Vader, Yoda, and Luke.
Amazing. So yes, both Luke and Vader have components of being the main character. What are characters in the movie where you're like, yeah, definitely role character, no question?
Han Solo, definitely. I mean, he was a role character. What do you think, Joe?
So what do you mean by role character, I guess, is what I'm struggling with.
Okay, I'll define it like this. And this is why I'm bringing it back. The main characters get into difficult situations and they find a way out. They find a way to resolve the problem. Specifically Luke, like you think about him getting thrown down in the Rancor pit. Not like nobody else is saving him. He's the one that's pulling himself out. He's got to fight Vader. Even if he gets jacked up and his arm cut off, he still just takes the hit. Nobody's coming to save. Like, he's the one that's making the decision of where he's going and when. Even like Han Solo in The Empire Strikes Back, he's making main character decisions. He's making decisions of when and where he's going to go. Chewbacca is a role character. He just happens to go everywhere that Han goes. He's not making major decisions, tactical decisions with his life.
Obi-Wan Kenobi until the sacrifice. He was a role character. Gotcha. Yeah.
Yes.
Or the droids. They're just along for the ride for the most part, or following orders.
Yes. And he's, C-3PO constantly, oh, please, like everything's screwed. Like, please save me. Somebody's got to do something. Nobody is, he's always in the worst possible situation. It has to have, whether it's R2 or Han, somebody's got to save him. Otherwise he's screwed. So that is, I mean, and if you laugh at, like, you see those people in society that have to be saved. They need something good to happen for them instead of having it happen for themselves. So I look at, if someone is able to be a main character in their own story, they're making they can make decisions that other people don't like, that other people don't agree with. but they make it from the space of, I'm going to make a decision because it's what I believe is best for my growth, for my development, for my story to be interesting. And we get one chance in life. Like, why not write a story that's incredible and riveting and is someone that you want your kids to look up to and say, when we're facing an emotion, whether it's fear, anger, or joy, we decide to move the ball down the field and not stand on the sidelines.
Okay, so a main character is someone who is going to grow and adapt and make things happen to achieve accomplishments. Yes. Not to say they won't ever have setbacks, because they do, but that's all part of the growth. They overcome those setbacks to get done what needs to be done. Okay.
Right. I mean, if you want to oversimplify it, the main character is the one who has the story arc, right? The challenge, the holdback, the life-threatening thing, the crippling humanness that makes them a bad person that then they overcome and then become the hero at the end, right? I mean, more or less, the victor, however you want to say it.
So then being the hero or the main character in our own story is all about making sure that we are continually improving and getting things done, which would be having goals to accomplish instead of just going through the motions.
Yes. And most people don't do it. Most people stay on the sidelines and they're fine with the predictable. I could go to work, I get my paycheck, I go to the bar afterwards. I do the same things. I maybe like jump on and watch TV. And now we're getting into, you may not even be a role character. You're just watching somebody else play the game. Right. So and not that I watch football too. I enjoy those things, but like, what's the balance? Like, how much of my life am I focusing on myself and my development or my kids' development versus the emotions and consumption that can come with watching somebody else?
You know, I remember the 90s commercial where the dad busts into the room and he's holding the kid's weed. He's like, well, I found this, blah, blah, blah. He wrote, and the line is, I got it from you, Dad. You know, and I never wanted to be the dad that when I turn around and they've raged out. And this was not necessarily the case with my kid tonight. I could see a difference. But, you know, never wanted to do the things I did, was raged out, loud, just emotionally, spiritually, physically broke things and just trash them. And I never wanted to be, why are you doing this? Because I learned it from you, Dad. So I could see where they've learned stuff. But man, making that connection without having seen it. Thomas, let me throw this at you. It's along those lines.
Yeah.
Of our fathers raised us influenced by the way they were raised, right? With the connections they had with their dad or didn't have with their fathers and mothers. And it both plays in, you know, father becomes a father based on the both or the people that influenced them. And same here. And I've almost called it a curse between my wife and I's family of just choices our parents made in different realms. We have broken pattern, maybe is a better word. We've broken that pattern. Breaking the pattern is one thing, man. How do you jump from breaking the pattern to building a new healthy pattern along the lines of teaching them to be the main character in their own story?
So you're saying if a dad is coming from an environment that he felt was unhealthy.
So I'll just give you one. My dad was very passive.
Please.
Not passive aggressive. He was just passive. And to the point of where I was like, we would talk about movies and stuff, but never about real life things. And to the point that one day when I was 18, 19, 20, I don't remember, my mom and I got into a verbal fight about things, and he just laid on the couch. And he didn't get involved. He didn't say anything. He didn't interject. He just laid there. And so while we have a little bit of a connection now, and we can talk about some things now, lots of years were missed. So I at the risk of hurting his feelings, and that's not the intent, because I don't even think he listens, but if he were, no harm intended, but I don't feel like I learned how to be a strong, connected father from him. So I've been trying to build connections with my kids the best I can while also supporting the family and pushing school forward and a lot of other things. And there's times that you have to make the decision of, no, I'm your father and you're going to do this. And I'm just winging it, man. So how do you have some tips or guidelines? So from winging it to, okay, I broke the bad pattern. Somebody could, not
Yes.
for me, but I came from an abusive father or blah, blah, blah. How do you build a new pattern?
Yes. Okay. So without getting too far into the weeds, like I have what's called the Forge, the Leadership Forge. And anybody that's listening, you can go to dadswholead.com. There's a free leadership quiz, and then afterwards you'll get a copy of this. But there's 5 levels on the Leadership Forge. The first one, I'll just go through them and then kind of hit on briefly on what you talked about. Faith in our ability to govern ourselves, faith in our ability that our kids are going to have what it takes to be successful in life. And for me, faith that a higher power has called me to be a dad. I'm not a dad on accident. The second level is ownership, owning our results as a leader, as the leader of your home. A lot of dads don't identify as the leader of their home. Our society is leaned now, especially with sitcoms, towards identifying the mom as more of the leader. And not a leader like you're going to do what I say, but leader like, okay, if something doesn't go right, it's on me. What can I do better? Then we get into respect, mutual respect within our kids, between our kids, which is kind of what you talked about. Like, how do you have a positive interaction when your son has done something not ideal that maybe didn't serve him? How can you still have a positive interaction with him that's not, he's just going to shut you down as soon as you start talking?
Yeah.
Level 4.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I'll go through all 5,
okay.
And then you can jump back in
Sure.
and say, hey, let's talk about this. Level 4 is groundbreaking adventure. So this is my favorite one. When you get to that point where you're having good interactions, like respect level is, can you have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea with your kid and things go well? If you can do that, then have an adventure. Go fishing with them. Go do, train martial arts. Maybe you play a board game, something where you're engaged alongside with your kids. That changes a lot, because when you can get outside and do things with your kids, one, if you're riding a bike or climbing on a rock wall, they're not going to be on their phone. So now that they're engaging with you as a dad on a physical level, side by side, which is how fathers and sons used to connect for hundreds and thousands of generations. Go out with your dad into the sticks and come back with some meat. I mean, it sounds barbaric, but that's how we operated for most of the human species. It's how we connected with our kids. And at the very top of the pyramid is expectation. So for me as a dad, I know with my son, who's very naturally defiant against authority, that's just the way that he's hardwired. He wants to do his own way. I look at this every day. I'm like, okay, well, where am I at these different levels? Have I had an adventure with him? Have I have an interaction of mutual respect with Charles? If I am, then I probably in a position to have some type of expectation. Still, he's probably not going to like it, but it's going to land a lot better than if I'm just jumping straight to, I'm your dad, this is my title, you're going to do what I say. He's going to see me like a police officer. Mm-hmm. He's going to say, like, oh, I know that cop sits on this corner, and I'm going to just turn, or I'm going to talk to the cop and say, yeah, I know I wasn't supposed to, whatever. And then like, whatever. I know I said that, but I'm going to do what I want to do anyway. I was just trying to get out of the conversation in the ticket, so I don't want to have a relationship where I'm the police officer.
Random Kid says you become a father when your kid is born, but you have to earn the title of dad.
Yeah.
I get it. And I just wanted to throw up dadswholead.com. Go in there and we'll take that quiz myself. That was some good, powerful stuff. And of course, Dad Who Leads podcast. So Joe, again, since we're knocking the dice out because the flow works, I think we go to the commercial break where we talk about one more awesome thing that Thomas is doing. But let me get the commercial music. Come on. Here we go. Commercial music. Let's see if this fits. Nah, that's a little too soft. And let me get to one of our traditional ones. He's got to have the right feel. There we go. All right, everybody. Here it's time for the commercial break. And instead of telling you about patreon.com/wise_and_nerdy, where you can join the fan, we're going to tell you about Dads Who Lead. You've got a great father and son there, Thomas.
Yes. So if you have a teenage son, this is specifically what this is designed for. It's a rite of passage experience. So our goal with it is to create a container where dads and sons can go and like we've talked about today, how can they become the main character in their own story, and what does that look like? And in my time as a teacher, I saw that schools did a really good job of teaching kids how to do tasks for other people, but they didn't do a great job of teaching kids how to be the main character in their own story and do tasks for themselves. And so that's really what the weekend is built around. We do a middle school event and a high school event. It includes adventures, whitewater rafting, paintball. So it's a physically demanding event, a intellectually demanding event, and a mentally demanding event that stretches your son as an individual and you as an individual, and you just happen to get to do it alongside each other. So there's a really powerful connection that's formed coming out of the other side of it.
That's awesome. So you can go to dadswholead.com/DWL-retreats and look at all that information today. And now we're just going to give you a little music to contemplate how to talk to your kid. All right. So much goodness tonight. So much going on. And by no means are we trying to rush it, but it's very much, honestly, I did not expect this level of content to come out of an interview with somebody we've never met. And you really should go subscribe to this podcast. And you really should follow up on the website. It's got a lot going on there. And we're trying to be respectful of time. There's a little bit of a time thing going on tonight, and that's perfectly fine too. And Thomas, before we even get near the end of the show, I'd like to say we'd love to have you back on again at some point.
Hell yeah.
Talk about
Let's
different things. But Joe, I see where you've highlighted the box, and since we've thrown away the dice, I'm assuming you're pulling rank and going right to the bad dad jokes.
Sure, we can do that. We've got a couple here from Devo site.
Past, present, and future walked into a store and glared at each other. It was a very tense moment.
Ah, Devo. Devo, that's horrible. Thomas, how do you feel about bad dad jokes? You like them? You hate them?
I struggle with them. You know what? I enjoy hearing them, but as far as like coming up with like witty jokes, I was at the cash register the other day, and the gal is telling me a joke. I was like, because I had a couple things. She's like, "Do you want a bag?" I'm like, yeah. You know what? No, never mind. She's like, "Well, you got to decide." And I was actually, you guys, I'll be honest with you, I was buying tampons for my wife because she was out, and I was like, oh, I really am only buying one thing, but it's tampons, so maybe I should get it back. And she's like, I'm messing with you. Like, it's okay. I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm always the last person to get a joke. So she's like, I'm just going to give you a free bag. It's like,
I love it. I love it. Joe, you said there was another one.
Yep, there sure is.
What is another phrase for a breakfast pastry? A cinnamon roll.
I don't get that one. Yes, a cinnamon roll.
True.
I think there was a play on words there somehow.
I'm not getting it. I'm not getting it.
We really put the bad in the bad dad joke there.
And then before we move on to the next segment, we do have a speak pike. We have a voicemail from cousin Mike.
Hey, cousin Mike here calling in. Listening to a previous episode, I'm really behind, and you guys like, oh, I haven't heard from Civilian or cousin Mike in a while, and so I thought I'd just do an update. Just finished renovations, and the last piece to my new place has been installed, which is the internet. And
That's the last
I don't know
piece?
about most people, but with me, I can't live without the internet. So
Well, apparently you did.
I've been living between two places, started a new job, finishing renovations. So just had a lot going on. Wasn't able to pop in and leave a voicemail, but should be getting back on track once we get settled. So probably in the new year, I'll be able to kind of keep up and make sure I'm relevant with my speak pipes. But anyways, just throwing this out here as a great game to play if you haven't is the Hades franchise. So there's Hades 1, which is on everything, and then there's Hades 2 in early access on PC right now. And if you haven't, go play those games. It is a fantastically story-driven game, and it is also a Hugo Award-winning game. The first video game to win a Hugo Award. Fun fact. Anyways, take care. Bye.
My wife just sent me an IM explaining the cinnamon joke.
Oh, and
Enlighten
it
us.
is
So it was synonym, as in
another
name for.
If it has to be explained by homeschool teacher John, is it really a joke?
Well, and play on words doesn't always, especially when you need to see the spelling, doesn't always translate well to a telling rather than a reading. But yeah. Oh man. And then one other thing I wanted to announce. So our recording for December 12th, the question of the week is going to be, who is the kindest person you know? So, and if you are wondering, if you ever are like, hey, what was the question this next week? Or if you want to answer it, you can head on over to wiseandnerdy.com/calldad. And the upcoming questions of the week are listed there, along with the speak pipe button. So
you can also go to linktree/wise_n_nerdy. And at the very top of it is the access to our Discord. So you can join there. And we do have a question of the week room there as well. So I like that question. That's gonna be a tough one. Who's the kindest person you know? But coming into the last mile. Actually, before I ask this, Thomas, I want to ask just a random question.
Please.
Talking about the last mile in my head. About 16 now, 17-ish, because he's 14.
Sorry, you cut out for a second. You said my son?
Your son Charles is 16 or 17 roughly right now.
He just turned 17 recently. Yes.
As the father, where do you shift your energy from dad raising a kid to dad partnering with an adult?
Ooh, great question. It's gradual. I think this is the biggest disservice that we do for kids is give these numbers 18, 21 and all this. I really see independence as a skill. So it started, let's just say, when Charles was in 6th grade and said, okay, you're riding your bike to school by yourself now. And I'm going to show you how to do the traffic signals and ride your bike from where we are to school and how to do it safely and correctly. And here you go, you're off on your own. So that's like the start of the independence journey. So I always track, whether it's my son or my daughters or anybody that I'm helping, where are they? Where do they want to go? And then what's the skill gap? What's missing for them to get to that next level? And what's the least amount of effort that I can, not effort, but influence that I can have and still help them learn and get whatever the missing skill is, which Charles still has. He's not fully equipped to to live on his own yet. There are a lot of traits that he's ahead of his peers in, and there are a lot of traits that he's behind. So for me, sometimes I have to wait for Charles to call me, and he's trying to like start a business or something, and he'll be like, hey, I'm doing car detailing, and I was thinking about doing this, this, and this. And what do you think about this idea of I like buying some AirPods from China and then selling them like this way? Like, what do you think of that idea?
Yeah.
Wait for him to come to me, and then I can kind of give my input. And that's a lot of times the best is when he's asking me a question for input as opposed to me just soliciting my unwelcomed advice.
Since I told you about my father, I have definitely made, I don't know if it's a mistake because I know things are landing. I know things are planting seeds in them, but I have been the unsolicited advice, just sit down, we'll tell you a story anyway kind of guy. And I do seek the days that my kids come and ask me advice. And it happens rarely with the older ones, but it's nice when it does. And I realize that's a making of my own choosing, but I kind of rather have that than I don't know. I had the opposite when growing up, and all you can do is just try. You can just do the best you can with what you got. So that kind of actually leads us into, now this can be how you deal with kids. This can be for yourself. But the question, Joe, you put in for the Parliament of Papas, which usually is more of a tongue-in-cheek segment. Joe was like, well, let's make it serious. So, Joe, what's the parliamentary question now?
What is stopping you? And that can be interpreted a ton of different ways. What is stopping you from reaching your goals? What is stopping you from starting down a path that you really want to take or that you need to take? Just in general, what is stopping you?
You're asking me first?
Just in general. Anyone who wants to pop in.
Why don't you go, Joe?
So I think a lot of people, and we've talked about this earlier in the show, they get into this rote going through the motions, and it's comfortable. It's comfortable to not change. And changing, they call them growing pains for a reason. If growth requires a level of discomfort, more often than not, and it's pushing past that is when growth is actually seen. And so getting started is often the most difficult step for a lot of people. It's taking that first step into realizing where they want to go. So yeah.
Well, actually, you have a book inside of you that you haven't started.
I sure do. Yeah, I've got a bunch of notes written down on my phone and in a OneNote, and I've been categorizing it. But yeah, I need to just sit down and start writing it at some point, because I've got a lot of the different plot points already in my head, and I highly doubt that I will write it sequentially. Most people don't. I'm gonna end up writing down the scenes that I have in my head and then figuring out how they mesh and work together. But ultimately, I need to just start putting words down.
Joe, do you feel like for you doing the podcast that it would be easier for you to tell the stories?
Like
just talk it out.
I ask because with the technology now, you can record, as you know, you can record a podcast. I'm going to talk about this episode, and it can, put it into a transcript, and then you can clean it up how you like it. I know you're fun to listen to, so I just put that out there. If you struggle with sitting down and writing with a pen or typing, it might be less resistance for you to do it over audio.
That's not a bad idea at all. And I recently found out that the internet version of Microsoft Word actually can auto-generate transcripts for you. So maybe, just start talking it and then clean it up from there. That's not... I probably wouldn't do it live on a podcast, because, that wouldn't be polished at all. But that's not a bad idea. Just speak it and then polish it after the fact.
Yeah.
Thomas is solving all the world's problems tonight.
Let's go.
So, in your own personal answer, Thomas, what is stopping you?
You know, naturally, I'm somebody, I like to help people and I like to solve problems and I like to be intentional and authentic to myself. I am not a person who is you're going to like be scrolling through your feed and then see me and be like, oh, wow, look at him, you know, or like, oh, he's saying something crazy that's going to piss off a lot of people. Like,
Right, yeah.
it's just not who I am. And so in this age, what's stopping me is finding that way to reach the right people who I'm the person for to help. In an age where there's a lot of flash and I'm competing with a lot of I don't want to say eye candy, but just like a lot of instant gratification type of short form content. So that's what I feel like I'm running up against is how can I reach people that I need to reach with still being authentic to myself, and catch the eyeballs.
That is tough. I've always hated clickbait. I talked on a panel this past weekend about not just being authentic in the way of showing your true self, but being, like what you said, being authentic to yourself and going like, TikTok. If you really watch the way my wife uses it or other people, 30 seconds, boom, 30 seconds, boom. I don't do anything in 30 seconds. And so my shortest video is still like 4.5 minutes long on a platform that really feeds into 30-second, 45-second bits. But it's just what I have to do. But what is stopping me is me. It's always me. It's always either I overthink it or I push too far or I do so much in a short period of time that I just exhaust myself and there's no pacing. So, like typically on Saturdays, I'll get up, I'll edit this show, I'll take care of another project that I do, and that's 30, 40 minutes, and it's up. And then I'm out here, and the family's off doing stuff, so I have hours to work. And over the last, not counting the weekends I was busy, over the last 2 months, it's just been like, I'm so exhausted because I've gone and gone and gone and done multiple shows and done lots of work and this and that, the other, that I'm not... You re-edit. We want to do a new intro for the show. I'm not even doing that simple task. I'm not. One of the things I want to learn this year is how to make the type of music that we played for the commercial break because it's always intrigued me. I've got basic stuff like to join with what you said, Joe. Essentially, I've got notes down. I've got some ideas. I've got some tools. I'm just not using them, and it's so easy to quote Shia LaBeouf of going, you said yesterday, yesterday you said today, just do. And that is partially true. Just do it. I don't know, man. I just let other things distract me. I want to ask a hopefully a basic question, Thomas.
Sure,
do you do the leadership dad, all of that encompasses? Do you do that as a living now, or do you still have to maintain a day job in the meantime?
Yeah, so I left my teaching job in 2022 and made the jump into this. So I'll do the retreats during the summertime, and then I do one-on-one leadership coaching with dads who are wanting to solve specific problems. And specifically, dads come to me who are willing to say like, hey, my kid is acting a certain way, and I want to change how I'm leading them. So a lot of parents are like, hey, my kid's acting a certain way. I want to change my kid. That's not the person that I work with. I work with the person who says, okay, my kid's acting this way. I know I'm not able to control him or her, but I can control our relationship. I can't control how I lead him. And that's what I want to focus on. And in the end, it truly ends up being a lot more impactful for the whole family because the dad's modeling the behavior that he's hoping to see. And so it sticks. It's not as quick, as the coins in the jar and some of the schemy stuff, but it's lasting.
And that ties right into what is stopping you. What I heard was asking the right question, right? You phrase it in your world of, hey, my kid is doing this. How do I change myself to help with that and influence the change? And, Joe, I don't know what the right question would be, but some question that leads you into, okay, writing the book now. And for me, same thing. I've got a book I started a long time ago that I put dust on. I've got some shows I need to polish and put out of seasons. What is stopping me is I think it is not asking the right question, because it feels like, that resonated somewhat, not just as a dad with a kid, but just with changing your life. Every time my life has changed for the positive, it has been because I asked the right question. So I guess we got to, maybe we did solve the world's problems tonight, Joe, at the Parliament of Positive. Ask the right question, man. Great stuff. Great stuff. I see our time here. So I want to give another run through here. dadswholead.com. Go check it out. It's amazing. I subscribe to your podcast, Dads Who Lead podcast. And then I'm going to be looking at least my 13-year-old. I missed out. My oldest son is 19, so I imagine, and he's not in high school anymore, so I imagine we've aged out there. But definitely want to look at the DWL retreats and see how that can change a life. Because I've never been an outdoorsy guy. I don't want to take my kid hunting or fishing or camping. Joe will take Bob and Jebediah out to an igloo and sleep in the snow somewhere. But I'm not down with that. I need my internet and my comfort. But I saw a little glimpse on the site while I was putting up the links, and you got paintball, and you talked about all these other things that I've already slipped my mind. But I'll listen back to the podcast, and I'll go read the website. So everybody should check that out. Yes. Thomas, it has been fantastic to have you on tonight.
Thank you.
We appreciate all the advice that you've given. Random Kid, who's one of our longtime contributors and listeners, this podcast is a bit more serious, but I'm loving it. This is not brought to you by McDonald's, Random Kid. Stop trying to slip the plugs in, all right? So, all right, thank you, everybody. It has been an amazing night. We love you all, and we will see you again next week.
Follow these nerdy dads on social media. Charles at Rock God of Podcasting. Joe at Joseph_Ard. Check out the website, wiseandnerdy.com. And as always, they may not be your father, but they'll always be your daddy.
And VO by Kurt everywhere, except on this show tonight.